Okay. Can you all hear me? I assume that you can. Excellent. Hi, I'm confused on how to do step 5 on chapter 5, problem solve 1. Okay. So, step 5, chapter 5, 1. Let me just pull this up here for you. Obviously, it should hopefully go without saying that you need to name it properly. Okay. And then, let me just pull up step 5 here. Okay. Excel's taking some time to start. That's odd. Come on. Okay. I'm just gonna pull up my completed copy. And it should work just as well. So, chapter 5, homework 1 about call center. Excel, how you doing, buddy? You want to work? Okay, guess you don't. Well, let's fix that. Alright, Excel, get out of here. Okay, can we... Come on. What is up with this thing today? I'm sorry, Brian, by the way. I don't know what's going on. Excel seems to be losing its mind. Friggin' Microsoft OneDrive, Microsoft. Come on. Ah, there you are. There it goes. Okay, okay. Here we go. Okay, so you didn't say chapter 5.1 was going to be canceled. If I'm remembering correctly, chapter 5.1 is the last one that is due for credit, and then all of them after that are due for extra credit. And so the point values on chapter 5.1 and everything before it have been doubled. So yeah, I think this one is the last one that is for credit, Caitlin. But anyway, Brian, to answer your question, it was a function, but on Friday he couldn't figure it out in class. I don't know what to tell you there, but I don't have, if you have class on Friday, I don't know what to tell you because I don't have the same professor as you do. Unless you mean Thursday. But that's a thing. Let's see here. Basically, as far as I'm aware, 5.1 is still for credit. Anyway, to the actual answer. Step 5 says, in cell H10, enter an index function that will use a nested indirect reference to the department named range listed in column C, use the reason field in column B, and the row number to return the department name, and then nest it inside of an if function. So let me explain what's going on here. Unfortunately, I can't really zoom in what's going on here, so you're gonna have to see it. So, basically the way the index function works is you have a reference and then your row number. So for reference, what is acting for the reference is the indirect function, and indirect is just for using a reference text. So as you can see, we're using the department named range, and so that's what's going on here. And then the row number is based on your reason field. So basically what this means, this little syntax right here, because this whole thing has already been turned into a table by now, if you click on the first cell in the reason field, instead of saying like B10 or B11, it'll actually return this bracketed at reason thing, which just means for the given thing, it will return the reason in that row. So like in this one, you can see that down here, at reason returns this red box right here. So then what we're doing, it says nest it inside an if function, and if the reason is 0, return nothing. So basically, what happens is we're using this function, and if this function returns a value of 0, well, then instead of it saying 0 on screen, we want it to be blank. And the way that it's blank is this empty text string right here. So when I say text string, it's because it's in quotes, so you just put nothing, literally nothing, in quotes. And then basically the value if false is just whatever the function was. So if the function did return something other than 0, then you want it to return whatever it does. So in this case, there are only non-blank values here. So basically what happened, for example, in cell H11, is that this whole index thing returned something other than 0. So I told it with the value if false part of the if function, see value false index, I told it to return whatever it actually was, rather than just nothing. So that's how that works. Does that answer your question, Brian? Cool, it does. Awesome, awesome. By the way, if any of you haven't been here before, you just give me a problem number and a chapter, and I help work through it. Oh, and in light of the fact that all of the assignments are opened up again, you're welcome to ask me questions about any of the prior assignments. I'm stuck on step 13. I can't do any of the last steps. Could you do step 13 on chapter 5, problem solve 1? Yes. Yes, let's do that. So, step 13 is in cell B12, add an average if function that will find the average call length for the department named range and the criteria specified in cell and the criteria specified in cell A12, and then in C12 add a countif function that does the same thing. Okay, and this is in the call center report sheet. So you can see here that, yes, wait, no, wrong one. What is it? It's B12. Here we go. Okay, so the way the average if function works, by the way, if you haven't used this insert function thing before, also let me get rid of this document recovery thing. or not? Well, yes, open. Open two workbooks at the same time with the same name. That's fine. Just close it then. There we go. Okay. Anyway, open up this average if thing so you can see the question actually, the step actually sets everything out for you. It says for the department named range, so your range is department, and then the criteria is specified in cell A12, so your criteria is A12, and then it says that it wants you to find the average call length. So your average range, what you're actually trying to average, is call length. So you just do that, and then you're good to go. And then you'll see that the countif function is almost exactly the same, but somewhat easier, is that it just says the department, find the countif for the department named range in the criteria specified in cell A12. So if it wasn't clear, the criteria is A12. So if you can see here, the criteria is public affairs. So what it's doing is counting all of the entries. What this countif function is doing is it's counting all of the entries in the department column, which is this column right here, that have the number, that have the criteria specified in A12, A13, A14. So basically it's checking what department they are and counting them up. So in this case, it counts up the number of public affairs ones. And these aren't the only public affairs ones. These are just the ones that fit the filter that we set up in an earlier step. But in the end, it ends up counting that there are 32 public affairs 32 public affairs of friggin' calls. So if you were to get rid of these filter, if you were to get rid of this yes filter and do the filter for only public affairs, you should have 32 entries here, if you were to count them out manually. Does that answer your question, Luis? Sure does. I appreciate your help on that one. Great, great. I'm glad that it worked for you. And then Austin, step 2, chapter 5, problem 1. Okay, so keep forgetting to mute myself whenever I've got a copy of the stream running, and so basically I accidentally overlay my voice several times. So anyway, step 2 is creating named ranges. So basically, you've already created named ranges before in the list worksheet. I'm going to assume, Austin, that you probably know how to do the first 3. You select cells A2 to A6, and then you go to formulas, and then you hit define name, and you call it department. And I'm not going to do that here simply because I've already done it, because this is a completed sheet. But you do that, and then grade scale refers to this set of cells, and then day of week refers to this set of cells. So I assume what you actually want help with is the whole top row named ranges thing. So it says select the range E1 to I5 and create named ranges using the top row's range values. So this is actually easier than it looks. So first thing you do is you select E1 to I5, and then you'll notice here in formulas, define names, one of your options is create from selection. So it'll auto-generate named ranges based on a certain thing. So the only thing you want it to generate based on is stuff in the top row. So basically what will happen, since we've selected create names from selection, create names from values in the top row only, what happens is we get a named range called public underscore affairs that refers to cells E2 to E5, human underscore resources that refers to F2 to F5, etc., etc., etc. And so you could do all of these manually, but this is how you can make a bunch of named ranges quickly. So does that answer your question, Austin? Awesome. Great. My step 14 answers seem too high. I'm getting 25, 24, 23, 23, 22 in that order. Let's take a look here. Step 14 is two COUNTIFs formulas. So what ends up happening, so basically this is how many you should get. You should get 6, 4, 12, 6, and 4 in that order. So basically you just do two COUNTIF functions. So notice it wants you to basically count that based on the given department, how many of them have a grade that is F and how many of them have a grade that is D. So basically what you do, so just look in this formula box right here as I try to explain it, is so your first criteria is department, because department's how you're counting however many calls there are, because remember you just want to count the number of calls. So, and then criteria A12 is that thing I talked about earlier where it checks the department range for whatever department. So if you look down here, it checks for human resources, and here it, and here it checks for admissions, and etc., etc. So, and then your second thing that you're counting is you're counting the grade column in this call data list. Yeah, sorry, I thought I saw something change on my sheet, and that wasn't supposed to happen. Anyway, you're checking the stuff in this grade column, and you're checking it for criteria F to see if it's F or not. And then you just make the exact same formula, except your criteria for grade is D. So basically, what would happen if you counted this all out manually is that of all 32 of the public affairs calls, 6 of them have a grade of either D or F. Does that answer your question, Luis? Yeah, I can see what you did with like the sum function. I actually did that at first, and Pearson counts it wrong. So yeah. In the same problem on step 3, I believe I formatted the table to get correctly, but I don't get the field label part. Format it as a... Oh, it just means, oh, field label, it just means, column label. So what will happen is, so once you make this column, and it will only have columns A through G at the start, right? So you make the table, right? And then these become green. So what happens is you just type issue in here, and it just automatically makes it a column. So all the field label means is just the column name. So that's literally all that's going to happen. And then you do the same thing with grade and weekday. So it's just auto extending the table for you. Hope that helps, Austin. In the call data list, how did you minimize the size of the chart that was originally used? So that's the step about advanced, Keith, that's the step about advanced filtering, which is step, oh boy, it's the last part of step 8. So basically what happened is, let's see, where is it? Boy. Oops. Oh yeah, I remember now. So there's the sort and filter. So you see this advanced little button for filtering. So we make an advanced filter, and you can see that it's kind of already here. So it's not selecting it's the whole table. So it's kind of hard to see, but you can see that the list is referring A9 to J128, which is the whole table. And then the criteria range is A1 to J2, and A1 to J2 is just this little thing right here. So basically, the fact that I've typed in public affairs here, and I've typed Y for yes here, means that of all of the 120 some odd records, it will only show records that have a Department of Public Affairs and calls that were on hold. So that's the advanced filter part of step 8. Does that answer your question, Heath? Fantastic. These last steps are difficult. On step 15, I understand the second part of the if-or function. I don't understand how to do the if there are more than 10 issues part. Okay, so if I remember correctly, you're talking about this one. Okay, so basically, what it wants is if the number of calls below C is below 10, or the number of calls below C divided by the amount of total calls is less than 50%, you want it to explore issues and otherwise say nothing. So, also my camera is not looking at me, so there we go. Anyway, so basically what we're doing is we have an if function, but if functions only allow for one logical test. And so we want to check multiple logical tests, and if any of them are true, then the whole thing is true. So that's what the OR function is for, is it checks two logical tests. There are tests. So it checks if this cell, D12, is below 10, and it checks if this cell, if D12 divided by C12 is equal to 0.5 or 50%. In this case, it is not, so the answer that it returns false, and the value if false is an empty string. So you can see here that even though this cell appears to be empty, there is still technically something there, but it's showing nothing because that's the result. So basically what happens is, basically anytime there are more than half of the grades are failing, or if there are just 10 failing grades, irregardless of how many there are total, we want to explore issues. So the only place, so you can see here, 4 is less than 10, but 4 over 15 and 4 over 15 is not 50%, so it's not true. 12 is greater than 10, so you want to explore issues, even though 12 over 41 is not 50%. Excuse me, 6 over 22 is not 50%, and 6 is less than 10, so it's blank, and 4 over 9 is not 50%, and it's less than 10, so it would be blank. So for example, if I change this to a 5, which I'm not going to, but if I change this cell to a 5, 5 over 9 is greater than 50%, so it would say explore issues here. Does that answer your question, Luis? Yeah, no problem, Luis. Glad it helped. Can you do step 5 again? Yeah. So step 5 is the index function. So yeah, so basically what's going on here is we're using an index function to return a value for the issue from this list thing over here, this whole thing over here. So you can see that there are several blank values in the chart for excuse me, issues, right? So basically what's happening is, if basically, it says to nest it inside of an if function so that issues displaying as a 0 will display as a blank cell. So the way that we do that is we write the test to check the formula to see if the formula equals 0. So this is the formula in question. So if the formula returns a value of 0, that's true, right? So instead, since it's true, we put in the value of true a blank string, which is just 2 double quotes. So now, anytime that this logical test resolves to 0, it's true, and the cell becomes blank. Anytime when the cell when it's not 0, so literally anything else, it just returns the value of the cell. Now, as for the actual function itself, the way the index function works is that you've got a reference and you've got a row number. So it specifically says to use the indirect function as the reference. So the way the indirect function works is you just say what is your reference, and in this case your reference is department, which is clearly stated in the step, and then your row number is this weird syntax for the reason column. So this is just because it's already a table, this is the syntax it uses for a reason column. Like, you wouldn't want to use a cell. Don't use a relative cell reference because Pearson won't accept that. While it's technically correct, using this syntax will make it easier, especially if you add stuff to the table. So that's why it's having you do this. And so basically, at reason will refer to the relevant cell every time. So you can see it refers to this one over here. If I move on to this one, then it refers to this one. And so the only reason that there aren't any blank ones on screen, for example, is because there's an advanced filter in place from step 8 that's getting rid of any issues that are anything that is not an issue. So like, for example, I can go ahead and clear the filter real fast. And you can see that there's some of these blank ones over here. They look blank, but as you can see, they do have values in them. So let me just go ahead and apply the formula again real fast. Or the filter again real fast. And yeah, that should explain step 5. Does that help you? Oh, I'm so sorry. Who was it? Does that help you, Haley? Awesome. Glad that worked, Haley. I'm switching up problems because this one seems a little easier. I'm doing chapter 3, problem 1. Would you mind helping me with step 2? Yeah! Let me just get the stuff pulled up for it. So, let's see. Chapter 3, number 1, which is this one on renovations. And then, what was step 2? Here we go. And then go away. Chapter 3. Down the previous steps. Step 2. Enter a formula using an absolute reference to determine the new capacity in F6 and the percentage in cell B13. Okay. So just in case it wasn't clear, we're on Chapter 3, Problem 1 now, because someone asked for it. And it wants something in F6. So, or not F6, I'm sorry. F in G6. So it wants the new capacity. So the new capacity is based on the original capacity, and then it's also based on the increase in capacity, which is stated over here. Okay? So, we start off with the original capacity, which is F6, and then we add F6 again, but we want to find out what the change in capacity was, which is B13. And it says use an absolute reference, which means just put $sign here and $sign here. And so this means, so that what this will do is that when you copy the formula down, so pay attention to how this area right here changes as I go down. So see how these are relative references, the ones on the left, so they change when I copy it down. But this is an absolute reference, so it stays the same. So yeah, that's how that works, Austin. Does that answer your question? Cool. Oh, for the record, for those of you that don't know, I do this for an hour, so in about 15 minutes I will stop streaming. got to step 19 on chapter 5, problem 1. Not sure how to fill out the formulas. Okay, that works for me. Let's go ahead and take a look. Chapter 5, and the step is 19. So, okay, so it's all of the database functions. So, basically, so they're the same for each column, so you just do it. So you notice how everything is the same between these two, except all I'm changing is the column. So basically, how these functions work is you've got your database. It tells you what your database is, and your database is call data all. It tells you that your field is, it tells you that it wants to find the satisfaction rating. So it wants to count the satisfaction rating. So your field is satisfaction rating, which is B21. And then your criteria is call criteria, which it specifically tells you. And then for D average, it's the exact same thing. For D sum, it's the exact same thing. For D max, it's the exact same thing. And D min, it's the exact same thing. So basically, and then these 5 are all the exact same thing, except it wants you to find it based on based on call length. So yeah, based on the call criteria that you set. And reminder that call criteria refers to call center report hold on, A18 to J19. So okay, yeah, here we go. So it's referring to this stuff right here. So basically, it's counting everything in call data all, which is just the table, and it wants to find a call length of whatever you put in here. So, or something like that. But this is how you set up the formula. So does that answer your question, Luis? It's basically just the same across the board. It's the database is called data all, your criteria is your criteria as stated, and then your field is the only one that's kind of nebulous, and it wants you to find satisfaction rating, so your field is B21. No problem. I'm glad that I was able to be of use. Oh man, I get stiff in this chair, y'all. Ugh. One last question, Chapter 3, Problem 1, Step 5. Okay. Need to open it back up again, my bad. And then Step 5 was... the date diff function. My favorite. Oh boy, I hate this function, and I'm sure you did too. So basically, all that's going on here is the date diff function is a deprecated function that we shouldn't be using anymore, but we have to because Pearson is stupid. Talk to me later about how much I hate it, but basically there are 3 arguments here. So as you can see, Excel doesn't recognize it as a formula anymore because it hasn't been used since the 2007 version, I believe, but it still works, as you can see. So you've got your 3 arguments. You've got your start date, your end date, and the way that you want the date to be displayed. So your start date is obviously renovations started, so B6. Your end date is obviously renovations completed. And then the way you want it displayed is just put a capital D in quotation marks. I'm not going to explain why because it's not relevant. There are a bunch of different ways to display the dates. That could be like days, months, years, etc. And what you put in this third argument is what defines that. So just a thing to keep in mind there. But you can look it up if you want to see what the other ways of expressing it are, but this is what it is for this problem. That's all it is for that, Austin. Does that answer your question? Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, sure. Well, it is 9 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. So, if you got any questions for me, let me know, and I'll answer them. Alright, I'd say we're just about done here. So, thank you guys for dropping in. I hope I was able to help y'all out. And, I do plan on continuing these, even though they're all extra credit now. So, hope to see you back here next weekend. Take care.